Welcome to Arise America. I'm Charles Aniagolu. We begin tonight in Washington and a bombshell from Special Counselor Robert Mueller. His investigation has accused 12 Russian military intelligence officers of interfering in the 2016 presidential election. The indictments coming just days before a summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. The charges are certain to cast a shadow over their meeting. Here's Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein laying out the charges.
The indictment charges 12 Russian military officers by name for conspiring to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. 11 of the defendants are charged with conspiring to hack into computers, steal documents, and release those documents with the intent to interfere in the election. One of those defendants and a 12th Russian military officer are charged with conspiring to infiltrate computers of organizations involved in administering elections, including state boards of election, secretaries of state, and companies that supply software used to administer elections. According to the allegations in the indictment, the defendants worked for 2 units of the main intelligence directorate of the Russian General Staff, known as the GRU. The units engaged in active cyber operations to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
Arise America's Akisa Omulepu spoke with Wallace Ford for legal analysis. He's the chair of the Public Administration Department at Medgar College. Let's listen in.
What do these new charges tell us about the Robert Mueller investigation?
Well, what they definitely tell us is that President Trump's claims of witch hunting and that it's a sham and a hoax, that is clearly not the case. This is very, very serious charges we're talking about. The GRU is not just some little Boy Scout organization in Russia. The GRU is the successor to the KGB, which I guess everybody's heard about. And imagine the Secret Service and the CIA and the FBI being rolled up into one and then being controlled by one individual, and that is, of course, Vladimir Putin. You start to get some idea of the strength of these particular charges. There is no question that the GRU individuals, the 12 that were indicted, just absolutely don't do this without the express permission and direction of Vladimir Putin. The fact that the president now still sees it's okay to meet with him in Helsinki at the beginning of next week makes you wonder what would it take for him to postpone the meeting and perhaps holding Melania Trump hostage. I don't know what it would take, but clearly if this doesn't get him to at least postpone the meeting, nothing will.
So the charges have been made. Is there any possibility that any of the 12 Russians will be arrested?
No, not at all, because there is, as you can imagine, no extradition agreements between the United States and Russia, and so as long as those individuals decide not to come to visit Trump Tower, they're not going to be arrested. But the people at the Justice Department know this, but the point was to make the point that indeed this interference in U.S. elections took place at the highest levels in the Russian government, and that this is not something that is just made up. This is not something that's a witch hunt, as it is, and clearly the actions of the Russian government were to interfere in the election in order to favor Donald Trump. Now, the question that the Trump people said, we didn't know anything about it. We have multiple meetings between representatives of the Trump campaign, including Donald Trump Jr., I might add, and with representatives from Russia. And typically in United States elections, if you're in a campaign for whatever office, but certainly for President of the United States, and you get a call from somebody saying, well, I'm from Russia and I've got some information for you, the next call you make is to the FBI, not, gee, I'd like to hear what you have to say. So at the very least, we're talking about incredibly bad judgment on the part of the Trump campaign, and I think when all the facts come out, we're going to see that it's a lot worse than that.
So that leads me to my next question. Do these new charges undermine the president's claim that it's a witch hunt, it's fake news? What happens?
Well, you know, Akisa, I wish that were true, but Donald Trump, if nothing else, is a master distractor, and in that regard, he has been saying that this whole investigation is a witch hunt, it's a sham, and all these things for so long. And he's of the belief, and Joseph Goebbels, when he was working for Adolf Hitler back in the day, said, if you keep saying the same lie over and over and over, people will believe it. So there's 35% of the population, perhaps 40% of the population, that even if you had Donald Trump on tape speaking to Vladimir Putin saying, tell me what I should do next, will still not believe believe that there was collusion. So it doesn't detract or distract his base. On the other hand, I would hope that there's other Americans and people of goodwill, including some of the Republicans in the House and the Senate, who will see that this is just very, very bad for the country. Forget about party for the moment, forget about majorities, forget about the midterm elections. You cannot have Russia getting engaged and involved in the U.S. elections. And who's to say what impact all of this had on the election? What we do know is that they favored Donald Trump. We do know that they took actions to hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign. And what we do know is that Donald Trump won. I'm not a math expert, but 1 and 1 still makes 2.
So speaking of the Senate, you mentioned that President Trump will be meeting with President Vladimir Putin next Monday, on Monday in Helsinki. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia has expressed concern that President Trump could be influenced by President Putin. Should lawmakers be concerned?
They should be very concerned. And if past is prologue in this case, Donald Trump will be meeting with Vladimir Putin with only a translator in the room. And so we don't even know what's actually being said between these men. But what we do know is that both of them lie. What we do know is that both of them have interests in Donald Trump staying as president of the United States. And let's keep context in mind. He just came away from excoriating the members of the NATO alliance. He just came away from criticizing Theresa May, Prime Minister of England, in England, with respect to her Brexit strategy. And now he's going to meet with Vladimir Putin, even though there's this indictment saying that his minions, at clearly his direction, sought to interfere in the United States elections. And so yes, and there's 100 members of the Senate, and if you're telling me that that's only one member of the Senate that's got a problem, then we as the American people have a problem. All the other 99, if they don't have a problem with this, the question becomes, what would be a problem?
So you kind of led me to my next question. President Trump is in Europe right now. He criticized and chastised our NATO allies. He criticized Theresa May, then denied it, then apologized about the criticism.
Right.
What does this do to our European alliance?
It is not. It can't be good. I mean, again, history is very important for people to understand, and is that until the end of World War II, there have been wars in Europe, which affect the United States, of course, going over several hundred years, and that since World War II, we have not had major warfare taking place in Europe, and as a result, there have not been any world wars at this point. And obviously, there's any number of conflicts around the world, but just think of how bad it could have been without this alliance, without countries understanding their common self-interest. Now you've got Donald Trump coming in and just kind of kicking over the table and saying, well, if it's not done my way or the American way, then we're just not good. We're going to take our toys and go home. That's not dysfunction is not a good thing here, and I think anybody should be very, very concerned about what happens next, because this doesn't happen in just in compartmentalized situations. What do the people in France say about this, or what do people in Germany? They have feelings too, and there's somebody saying that your country is under the control of Russia, and without understanding what that really means, because at one point half the country was under the control of Russia. And that was a very bad time for the German people, and for Donald Trump just to throw that line off as if it's just meaningless. It's not meaningless, and I think it's not a very good time that we're seeing in terms of international relations. And that's, let me just say one more thing, is that when Donald Trump was running for president, people would say, a number of people said, well, he has no foreign policy experience at all. And during the campaign demonstrated that he really didn't care about policy. He said he got all of his news from the shows, information from the shows. And you see what actually happens when you put that into practice. You can't just let somebody become president of the United States without at least recognizing where their limitations are, so they can take advice from other people. This man does not do that, and we're seeing, he reminds me of the guy at the end of the bar after about the third or fourth drink saying, yeah, we ought to do this, yeah, we ought to do that. But this is the president of the United States, and it's very, very, very bad, I think, for the country and frankly for the world.
So now, continue with that line of thought. President Trump is known to speak off the cuff, but it's actually his inner circle who are now speaking. We have Michael Flynn, who's talking to authorities, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen. Could there be new charges on the horizon, given that we have his inner sanctum talking to the Robert Mueller investigation?
Well, Michael Flynn has already pleaded guilty. For example, Paul Manafort has major charges against him. there's a lot of disarray in the Trump circle at this point, and what people don't seem to understand is that the Department of Justice really doesn't play around in these kinds of investigations. I would not be surprised, I'll say you heard it first here, if Donald Trump doesn't try to take some action to get his Attorney General to fire Rothstein. It's not Rosenstein. Excuse me, Rosenstein to fire him or to somehow compromise him. I would put it beyond this person at this point because you remember this is the same person who says, as president, I can pardon myself. And he really believes that's true. Most legal scholars may differ on it, but he doesn't believe in legal scholarship anyway.
So a final thought, continuing with that line of thinking, is the investigation in jeopardy then?
It is, well, yes. Remember, this is the man that fired James Comey just one day and did it without any warning at all. What he might do with Rosenstein, we just have to see. But it is clear. He was briefed, and this is a very important point. The whole business with the indictments, Donald Trump knew about this 3-4 days ago, yet he still said, I'm going to have this meeting with Putin. Yes, yet he still goes on the warpath with respect to the NATO alliance, and it's just, the bull in a china shop kind of situation. But, if you look back in history, when you have meetings like this take place and something comes up, and you say, well, okay, we need to clear this up, and you don't ask, there's no more about, I'm going to ask Putin whether or not he's responsible. Your intelligence agency has said, Mr. President, that he has, and his people have. And so you don't ask somebody what do they think about these accusations. You rely upon your own intelligence agency. And if he's not going to do that, then that's one of the oaths, one of the parts of this oath of office in terms of carrying out his duties as President of the United States that's really at risk here. So we will have to see, but I think it's a very, very difficult time that we're looking at.
Thank you, Wallace Ford from Medgar College.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
And you're watching Arise America. We'll be back after this.
From coast to coast, every culture, every angle. This is Arise America.